Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and analyse 6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations, but actually looks at geopolitics in the round. Today's episode is part 2 of an episode that I started last week.
Well, do you know what? One of the things that I was talking to a PR friend about is one of the things that I think is quite one of the things that we can laugh about, I suppose, is that if Keir Starmer were to successfully navigate this campaign through to young people and get the buy-in of young people, he would actually have to use social media influencers because because that's the cultural reach. But then if you flip it the other way, right, then if you look at the cultural influencers, so take someone like Mr. Beast. I mean, I know we've talked about Mr. Beast before. Like look, Mr. Beast is a multi-billionaire. I mean, I think there was one stunt episode that he did where he basically just bought YouTube for 5 minutes and then sold it back to them. Now, whether or not that's true or not, but they, the content was, he showed that he was buying it and then, they sold it back and, and it got trillions of views, right? But just imagine you're Mr. Beast, right? And you're thinking, right, great, I've built this huge empire on creating content for young people, right? And now I need to suddenly, if I'm going to exist as a social media celebrity, I'm actually going to have to pivot my entire business model and create content for adults. So, we were kind of laughing and saying, so there's one very famous Mr. Beast stunt where he buries himself alive for a week. And we were sort of saying, is he going to now have to just bury himself in the graveyard next to Granny, next to dead Granny for a week because, now his audience isn't that young audience. Or, I mean, there's another platform called Ryan's World, which, so the kid, Ryan, I mean, he started it when he was about 4. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if listeners are familiar with the concept of unboxing, but, you're probably not, Carlton, so I'll explain.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it, unboxing stuff.
So basically you receive a toy in the post and then you open it and you're filmed, opening it, and it's as basic as that, right? But Ryan's World, I mean, made this kid, again, a huge fortune. And so you can't, so one of the things, even outside of the me being slightly sarcastic and flippant about, what, oh my goodness, what a content creator is going to do, you also need to think about the level of authenticity and trust that young people have in, TikTokers that they follow or YouTubers that they follow or, et cetera, and where are they going to be signposted to now to get that level of information? I mean, to give you an example, so my 9-year-old watches a lot of tutorials about how to on YouTube about how to draw things, And they're actually very sophisticated, and his level of technical drawing is amazing. But he finds these videos, he watches them, he or my 14-year-old, he likes to mod bikes. I mean, his actual passion project, which is quite niche, is modding a push bike into a petrol bike.
Okay.
And he's taught himself. He's done about 3 of them now, and he's entirely taught himself from YouTube videos. My 9-year-old, he plays Minecraft. I mean, he plays Minecraft responsibly with his friends, but he's in a lot of super leagues. He's incredibly good at Minecraft, and so he upskills himself in terms of playability hacks by watching YouTube videos. So the question is, where are young people signposted to now to find this information? Because
the bigger question,
are we actually suggesting that they go back to the library? Because that would just be insane, wouldn't it?
Well, the bigger question is, Fergs, is all of that work that your 2 children have put in to learn skills from the internet, as older people would say, from the internet, right? To learn skills. Does that mean that what they're now going to do is go out and run in the fields? No, it doesn't, does it? Because that's not the world they live in. No,
and the flip side is, my 12-year-old, again, he taught himself, like, he's really into football. He taught himself quite a lot of specific ball
drills,
skills.
Drills,
yeah. That's what you call them. Yeah. Well done. Thanks, Carlton. But then, so he'll watch the YouTube tutorial, and then he'll go out into the field and practice for 3 hours, but it's the fact that he had the impetus to do it because somebody said, right, look, Ronaldo does this, here's how to learn how to do this. Go on, off you go. And then off they go. But then,
you know what that shows? You know what it shows? You've got 3 children, and they're all doing
I've got 4 children, Carlton.
Sorry, 4, yeah. But the ones you mentioned, 4. But they're all doing different things, but they're all using the modern media to make it possible for them to be better, right? Now, who thought this ban up clearly has not assessed that in any way, shape or means. And this is the point that I did want to make earlier on, and I was going to go into it and then I forgot it. You know me. Is that we don't just live in the United Kingdom, okay? The world is a big place, a very big place. The G7 is 778 million people, okay? That's what the G7 is, where we are saying this is the top level of the world, the G7. Actually, it isn't. The G7 has dropped down now. And BRICS, okay, which is something like 4.2 billion people, is what's taking over. Now, those in the BRICS, as a general rule, are not mollycoddled in the way that those in the G7 are, because of the legacy systems of having won the Second World War or having been industrialized prior to the Second World War. So I'm talking about Germany and Japan having lost it, but having been industrialized prior to that. These up-and-coming industrialized systems, which had a great history probably 500, 1,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, whatever it might be, these people now are coming through and are using every technical piece of capacity that's available to them to be number one, right? And our so-called children up to 18 are being left behind because they're not utilising those technical skills and abilities in a way that it's to get on, to be an adult, to move forward, to have a future, to as a general rule, because they've been mollycoddled. And I'll put it this way, because people might say, oh, you're talking rubbish. I went to a school the other day to do a talk, right? The guy, as I went in, you've got to go in now in these days, and I'm giving a talk to sixth formers, whatever they call it now, class, whatever the number class year is, right? So that's people at 18 years of age, 17, 18. So the next move for them is university, right? 17, 18. So I go in and I say to the school reception person who's waiting at the reception desk, I've come to give us a talk, blah, blah, blah. She says, oh, okay, I'll have to call a teacher for you. Now, this guy turns up, big old beard on him, you know, a metre taller than me. And he says, oh, I'm going in there. I'll take him. I'm going into this same lecture. And she says to him, you're a child. You can't take him. Right. So he says, actually, I've just turned 18. He says, yeah, but you're still a child because you're here at school, so you can't take him. We'll have to wait for the teacher. And I thought to myself, the world has gone mad. So they think in the walk between me from the reception to the classroom, I'm going to somehow turn this big old strong 18-year-old bearded up fella, right, to do some, I don't know, do some negative action or something, because he can't take me to a classroom because he's a child. Where do we live? You know, I've been to schools in all parts of the world when I used to take ministers around, secretaries of state, and we'd go in and the kids would have no shoes on, they'd have a bit of a uniform that they've made, and they were disciplined as hell to get something done. That 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and they're disciplined, and the head looks at them and they're doing their work and they're thinking, yeah, this is what I need to do to get on. Ours, they can't even take me to a classroom that's 30 meters away. Where do we live? What's wrong with our system? We're infantilizing people. It's incredible.
Well, okay, so yeah, it's interesting that you raised that stat because I mean, I would say children account for probably 25% of the global population. So, you know, so one of the things that it would be interesting to unpick a little bit, and I'd love your insights into this, is again, you know, that there's a lot of backlash about the ban in that it is creating a facility to data capture people from a younger age through a journey, you know, so by like I said earlier, you know, in this pod, you know, originally some of those traditional platforms set an age of 13 just because there was some governance that said that you couldn't capture data from, you know, from a child unless they were over 13 without parental consent. This was obviously in the days before GDPR. You know, we're now obviously in a situation where if a 16-year-old wants to opt in to using social media, platforms are being encouraged to capture a lot of data, including potentially biometric data, you know, face recognition, etc., etc. So, is it actually a conspiracy theory to just capture more data earlier, and you know, under the duplicity of permission to have a TikTok account?
That's a very interesting one, because I would think a lot of what politicians do, and this all comes back to the politician, and you got to say that a lot of what politicians do is done from a perspective of a total and utter lack of knowledge. Okay, so what you tend to end up with is a lot of unintended consequences for a perceived gain at the time that it's done. So what they're now saying to you is, and this was going to be my question earlier on, what's to stop a 13-year-old saying they're 16? Right? What's to stop a 13-year-old giving a completely different date of birth, etc., etc., etc.? Okay? Right. If that's not possible, because you are fully capturing data and information on individuals, so it's not possible, right? That means you've got to have had an initial capture. Somewhere along the line, you've got to have had an initial capture that suggests that what's provided is true and real. Let me put it this way. If I say my name is Jack Jones and everything I ever do on the net is Jack Jones, then I'm Jack Jones. Okay? It's only when I actually try to do something else in another name that they say, you're Jack, but you're Jack Jones. Your fingerprint suggests you're Jack Jones. Your face suggests you're Jack Jones. Your whatever suggests you're Jack Jones. And you're trying to say you're somebody else, right? But if I first say I'm Jack Jones and I'm 35, that's me in order. Now, the problem with all of this is this info isn't even being given to a state. This info has been given to a private company. Right?
Agreed.
Because they're going to have to say that private company is the one that's going to have to make sure that that person's 13. So before you're doing anything else, a private company has got all of your information for that private company to do what it will with your information. Now, to me, that's outrageous. Right? This is where this all leads.
Agree. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And you know, and then just think, you know, with your spy brain on, you know, just think about, you know, at the moment. So so my 6-year-old who's neurodiverse, there's a Roblox game that he plays called Grow a Garden. Now it's pretty innocent. I mean, you literally plant carrots and harvest carrots and, you know, etc., etc. But he had to do one of those face scan things the other day. I mean, literally, you know, his account is age specific, but it kind of came up with a thing and it said, you know, they sort of have to make sure that the age that he's suggesting that he is the same. Now, you know, he's 6, right? But I didn't realize that he'd done this until my 14-year-old told me, because my 6-year-old had kind of said to my 14-year-old, what's going on? And then my 14-year-old, who's so, you know, tech savvy, that he just went, oh, this is what you need to do. Look left, look right, look, you know. So now my child's face scan is somewhere
in the hands of a private company. Exactly.
Right.
In the hands of a private company.
But what I'm trying to say to you is, like, what, you know, if we were to plot this out or sort of model out, you know, what's the worst case scenario that a private company could do with all this identity information, you know, with all this biometric info?
Everything.
Agree.
A friend of mine once said, who is an American, he probably was a billionaire, I don't think he is anymore. He once said that one of his favourite, and funnily enough, MySpace, I know the guy who invented MySpace as well. And when he invented MySpace, he said to me that he had no concept that it would be as big as it was. So again, this is what you've got to look to. These are the laws of unintended consequences. These things happen and they grow and they grow and they grow. And then, you know, what are we doing with all this stuff? And this is why I mentioned this, because in both these cases, and I'm going to tell you the other thing that the other friend said, in both these, and I've had him on the show, the other guy, both these cases suggest the possibility of what utility can come from information once you've actually thought about it after what you've done. So the other guy I was telling you about, these are both Americans. The other guy said his best invention, which he should have got into and he didn't at the time because he didn't see it in the beginning, was 123andMe. You know, that's the American ancestry thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So he said, think about it. And he said, I didn't think it through fully when he could have got in on it. These guys are venture capitalists. Okay. So think about it. They say to you, spit into this veil, send it off to me, and send me $32 at the same time. Okay? I've now got your very building block of you as an individual, everything that makes you as an individual. I've now got it. When I'm 123andMe or Ancestry, doesn't matter who it is. I've got that now. Okay? So I could effectively rebuild you when that tech comes about, because I now have got your building blocks, your DNA, right? But that's not what I do with it. You've paid me 32 quid, so I'm quids in, yeah? $32. I'm quids in, right? But no, what I do is I sell it to 10,000 companies who all pay me money, because I can then sequence you in whatever way I want. So, oh, you want to know how this affects these type of people? Oh, you want to know how it affects a person who's got this? Ah, there you go. And all these companies are buying this off me, right? And you've paid for it. To buy your very building block, you've paid for them to sell you to 10,000 other companies for whatever reason it might be. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
This is how they think. This is how they
Absolutely.
think. We're not. Joe Soap doesn't think like that. Joe Soap thinks, oh, I just want to see who my ancestors are. But these guys have seen it and then thought it through. Ah, right. So we can create this. We can do that. We can set them up. You know, let's say it. Physically, they could put you at the scene of a crime, right? And you won't have a clue how you got there.
Absolutely. Yeah, like completely. And then
It's super dangerous. And it's
yeah,
private companies. Private companies. Not even the government. You know, if you had a trust in your government, not even the government. It's private company. And the biggest baseline for private company, as we always say, is follow the money.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but that's yeah. Follow the money, and now you know, and you know, like you know, follow the tech, follow the line of information.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, it's funny actually. I've got a very very dear friend who is a disruptive artist, and
What does that mean, by the way?
so put it like this: he's best friends with Banksy. So
okay,
right.
Yeah.
But he has daughters, and you know, needs to do a few sort of respectable things in real life. And one of his challenges is that he, you know, as you were saying, he has a lot of internet pseudonyms and internet profiles because of his disruptive art. So then suddenly, you know, he's in a situation where actually, you know, really basic you know, really basic services are sort of questioning why he's got, you know, 14 different online profiles, you know.
Exactly.
But look, I mean, you know, I think like just circling back to this, you know, circling back to the ban, and you know, the way that we kind of started this conversation by saying like, look, it hasn't been thought through. And you know, we've obviously raised you know, multiple challenges, multiple questions, etc. I think, you know, one of the things, so I've got, you know, I said at the start, everybody's got their own opinion on this, and as a parent I've got two opinions. My first is sort of, you know, very much top line, you know, what are young people losing? What are they missing out on if this is removed? If something that was so embedded in their culture, you know, in their lifestyle. I mean, as I say, you know, they were all born into this. Social media existed from the day that they were born, and probably their birth picture was shared on social media. You know, like you know, but so first and foremost, what do young people feel that they will be losing? And then secondly, my massive bugbear is that since the pandemic, schools actively encourage online learning. So this isn't just like, look, you can't get to a lesson, so here you go, we're going to email you the homework. This is, every day you need to do your times tables on a platform called Times Table Rockstars, which gamifies times tables. Every day you have to, that you can't get a book from the library, you need to get a book from Oxford Owls. You can't we want you to do to submit your maths homework via this platform, etc., etc. So there needs to be a level of buy-in from the schools where, if Keir Starmer wants to go back to the 1970s, where they need to be going back to an exercise book and a pencil, because if we've got a situation where it's considered that, if a child accidentally, like my bugbear about all of this online homework has always been that there is a presumption from schools that every child has access to a device.
Correct. I was just going to mention that.
Yeah. Now, in a middle class family, maybe they do. In a family that's got fast broadband, maybe they do. In a family whereby there's one mobile phone and it's a pay as you go, and etc., etc., it becomes much more challenging. And this is always something that I've said. And the other thing that I've always said is that there are, that there are tablets that are specifically marketed for children. So Kindle for kids being like one of the sort of, the main ones, I suppose. But most of these apps that the school insists on are not optimized for those child-safe platforms. So you've got a situation where, like best case scenario, oh, mummy, I need to do this for maths homework. Okay, great. Can you do it on your Kindle? No, because I can't download the app. Oh, okay. But mummy, it's due tomorrow. Oh, okay. Well, do it on my iPad then. Okay. Well, I've got YouTube on my iPad. What's to stop? Am I supposed to then, invigilate whilst child does said task?
Said child at 9, you might do. Said child at 12, 13, 14, 15, you're not going to do. And more importantly, the impetus for said child at 12, 13, 14 to get that phone that allows them to do their homework on as a birthday present, a Christmas present, or whatever it might be, right, that allows them to do their homework, is that it has these other apps on which it can use in addition to doing its homework, because that's their impetus. So they're willing to say,
absolutely. It's
I'll spend my money to do that because it does that.
I mean, look, it's like a parenting slogan, you earn your screen time,
exactly,
sort of thing.
So therefore I question how you can make a ban, do your homework like you're saying or whatever, if it's not worth the family's while to buy that system that allows you to do your homework on. Because you might as well just turn around and say, well, forget having a mobile phone, we'll give you a smartphone, we'll give you a basic mobile phone so we know where you are, and then you can't do the homework.
Well, do you know what? That raises another interesting question as well, because I mean, I have my children on Life 360, etc., etc. But and there is a free iteration of Life 360. I pay for the paid version of it, but I'm not advertising Life 360. I'm just saying, parents will understand. But one of the features that parents may or may not be aware of, but certainly non-parents probably won't be aware of at all, is that Snapchat shows your child's location.
Right.
Now, you might be thinking, oh, you and Keir Starmer might be thinking, oh, well, that means that the undesirable knows where the child is if they follow them on Snapchat. Well, actually, if you flip it the other way, it means that it's a free way for the parent to know where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, this is it. There's always swings and roundabouts. And
oh, if only there were swings and roundabouts in the parks, and, name me a local park that's got a swing and roundabout that's fully functional at the moment. I
mean, what I'd say is one thing, because I'm conscious of our times in Great having you back and another great subject. But what I'll say is just one thing in leaving. I'll say the Falstead Act. Now, for those who don't know, the Falstead Act is an act brought into play by Senator Falstead. And if I give you the date, you may then get to it, in 1919. And that act is prohibition in the United States. Now, if you wanted to create mass crime in a country, ban alcohol, right? And if you want to create mass crime in a country after the banning of alcohol and then its reinstatement in 1932, then ban narcotics. So what governments do are things like that without thinking it through. Because the Falstead Act banned the use of alcohol in the United States as a prohibited substance. And what did people do? They said, bollocks. I don't generally say that. I'm having some of that. And that created the biggest amount of gangsterism that there ever was. What they did again, then subsequently, later on, started in America, is again banning narcotics. Now, the thing is this. I don't like narcotics, and I didn't like drink at one stage. Right? I don't like it. But the reality is if you'd have just kept it as it was, that drugs were generally normal, you would have generally had basic herbal drugs, because they would have been the normal drug that people took, because it's just, comes from the ground as it is. The fact that you ban it then starts people adding a whole load of nonsense to it because it's illegal. And as we're following the money, we increase the money again. So with alcohol, what happened is they started adding, again, poor substances into it. People went blind and all that, drinking rubbish alcohol. And the same goes for drugs. So when you make these decisions massively, we're banning this, full stop, we're banning it, you have to think about what the unintended consequences are. And the unintended consequences of this is you will have a whole lot of so-called young people, children in our vernacular now, actually finding their way around it in some way, shape or means, and potentially finding their way to even worse things. That's
I 100%. I totally concur. And as I said earlier, that children are young people are posting, are sharing hacks on TikTok. Absolutely. About how to about VPN QR codes and etc. etc. I mean, look, they will find a workaround. They will absolutely, or they will find the dark web, or they will find somewhere more dangerous. But one of the things that this sort of if we a finishing thought for me was I don't know if you remember or even if the listeners remember, but do you remember when we did that episode about handwriting?
Absolutely, I do. Yes.
So let's just imagine there's this sort of utopian world where that's going on in Keir Starmer's mind right now, where children can just have their childhood back and communicate in a more traditional way. Well, let's think about it, right? So let's say I'm a teenage girl and I fancy Steve, right? So I write I fancy Steve on the toilet door, and then somebody else writes Steve's no, I hate Steve, like, blah blah blah. And then there's like this sort of, that like I know you've never been in a
women's
girls
toilet.
in a girl's toilet, but you so you'd have that whole sort of toilet door chat, or you'd have notes passed back and forwards in the classroom, like, you pass a note to your mate, do you fancy Steve, yes or no? Right. And then it gets passed around, yes, blah blah blah. And so Steve has essentially like a social media network. Steve has a community network of, let's say, 6 girls in the physics class, right? Yeah. So imagine when I say think about what children are having taken away. I know I'm being slightly flippant, but if you're a teenage girl and you post like, do you fancy Steve, yes or no, on TikTok, and then suddenly there's 100,000 likes, well, Steve becomes a social media influencer, right? So all I'm saying is, if Keir Starmer wants to go back to the days of somebody having to clean Tipp-Ex and marker pens off the inside of the girls' toilet doors in schools, because that's the way that they can communicate whether or not they fancy Steve, so be it. But it, yeah.
But you got one thing wrong there, Fergus. You got one thing wrong there. In our modern era, according to the rights individuals, girls don't fancy people. The affections of people are forced upon them.
Oh, you're being Carlton, you're being unbelievably woke here. And
I
do appreciate that Steve might also be Sarah.
I've got tongue in cheek there, because this is where we are now. We are, and we've been saying it for quite a while. We did it on the gender one. Remember when we did that? We are at a position now where it's everybody fighting everybody else. And it can't just be something as simple as, actually, 6 girls do fancy Steve. It's got to be that Steve must have forced himself on these girls, because the normal, everyday 8 million years, no, wrong, what would be about 50,000 years of human beings just fancying people, men fancying women, has gone. It's now got silly where somehow, number one, the girl can't make such a decision that she fancies Steve, not until she's 16 anyway, right? And secondly, why would she fancy Steve? She doesn't need a boy or a man in her life. This is where we got to.
But I don't need a man to validate me. Yeah, I know. Do you know what, though? Do you know what? What I would like to see, if Keir Starmer really does want to make this his legacy, right? And again, I'm being flippant, but I would love him to just set up a platform whereby young people can just come to Keir and ask for the solutions to everything that every problem that they normally reach to social media for.
Well,
and then Keir will just give them the magical answer.
Well,
so,
let me finally answer that with one that you will definitely know and find interesting. Various young men are already doing that.
Okay,
brilliant. And some of them are setting his cars on fire. Just saying, right?
It's funny, actually. Like, okay, so there was a brilliant so in the Metro newspaper, so the Metro is like a free sheet newspaper for listeners' information, right? But it's a very well established free sheet newspaper. However, they do have a letters page, and there was so somebody wrote into the letters page this morning saying, a parent saying, I think that the social media ban is great, because I think that one of the traditional hobbies that children could now revert to could be train spotting. Right? And of course, in my media brain, the first thing I'm thinking is heroin. Right? But no, they actually meant train spotting, right? Yeah. But then, if you actually think about it, right? So look, you've got your train spotter in the, traditional era with their notepad and their flask of their flask and their cagoule, right? And they're going to see to try and capture an image of the 5:15 to Manchester or whatever, or or with their
the 5:46 because it's late. Yeah,
exactly. And then they're logging it in their notebook and all the rest of it. Well, actually, a social media network of train spotters would be the ideal platform for them to be, to support this niche hobby. But more to the point, there are probably a plethora of young creators who are, following the 5:15/5:47 with a drone, creating amazing cinematic photography, then editing it, then posting it, and then probably selling it back to Network Rail.
Absolutely. King Canute comes to mind. That's what I'll say. Fergs, super duper. Thank you very much. I'm just looking at times. I'm wondering if this is even a 2-episoder at the length of time we've done, but we'll see. I'll try and keep it to one.
We'll see. But all I would say, is, whilst you can, I would encourage, whilst you can, and whilst not wanting to be seen as leading a revolution, if young listeners, as I always say, anybody's welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but especially young listeners, if they would like to reach out to me on networking platforms before next spring, I would value their opinions.
Absolutely.
And I think, given the some of the surprising revelations that Carlton's made on this show, you might want to reach out to Carlton as well.
Absolutely that. And I will try and keep it to one. It's just that it'd be long, but I'll try and do that. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. It's great to have Fergs back, and I will see you again next week. Fergs?
It's great to be back, and I will see you anon.
See you then.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.